An investigation reveals a $1.3 billion swing in Yeshiva University's financial fortunes. Russian-American heritage is celebrated, and Israeli-Palestinian youth soccer is too. And more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Why is Yeshiva University in dire financial straits? The school had its bonds downgraded to junk by credit ratings agency Moody's in January. In March, Moody's said Yeshiva doesn't have enough cash on hand to last through 2015. The main culprit has been assumed to be Bernie Madoff, whose Ponzi scheme cost Yeshiva $105 million. A Bloomberg report from January illustrates this argument with a headline reading, "Madoff haunts Yeshiva as university slides to junk." But a new investigation by the Jewish Channel in association with TakePart.com reveals that the Madoff losses represent a fraction of the losses Yeshiva has faced. In fact, Yeshiva has undergone a financial swing of more than $1.3 billion, well more than 10 times more than the Madoff losses. How did Yeshiva lose that much money? Our investigation reveals that when a new administration took over between 2002 and 2004, Yeshiva changed its investment philosophy, where it had once balanced a large allocation to risky assets in the alternative investments category with a similarly large allocation to very safe U.S. treasuries. The new administration sold off more than 90% of those treasuries and plowed the proceeds mostly into hedge funds and other alternative investments, and to a lesser degree in corporate stocks. It was a high-risk, high-reward investment strategy that grew the school's endowment for some time, but these riskier investments did not bring in cash every year in the form of interest and dividends like their old portfolio did. Instead, they spent tens of millions of dollars for several years running based on the paper gains in their portfolio. Yeshiva also took on new debt to finance construction spending in those years, rather than pay for that construction out of plant funds. It was a strategy that leveraged the market growth of the boom years, but did not make provisions for a rainy day. When that rainy day came with the global economic downturn of 2008, Yeshiva's financials were drowning in a sea of red ink. The school's investment portfolio lost $525 million between 2007 and 2009, and since 2007, the school has run deficits totaling $470 million and accumulated an additional $390 million in debt. To read the full investigation, visit our Newsdesk blog at newsdesk.tjctv.com. The big story out of Israel this week is the kidnapping of 3 teenage boys in the West Bank, presumably by a Palestinian group. The 3 teenagers, aged 16 to 19, were abducted while hitchhiking home from yeshiva last Thursday. The kidnapping has become an incident of international concern, generating commentary by leaders across the Western world. Secretary of State John Kerry on Sunday said in a statement, "Our thoughts and prayers are with their families. We are still seeking details on the parties responsible for this despicable terrorist act, although many indications point to Hamas's involvement." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also has suggested that Hamas may be responsible. Throughout the U.S. and Israel, many Jewish groups are holding prayer services in hope of the boys' return. A social media campaign with the theme "Bring Back Our Boys" is prominent on Facebook and Twitter. Meanwhile, a story about a teenager in Massachusetts has cost a rabbi his job and inflamed a community, and criminal charges may yet be coming. Conservative Rabbi Barry Starr had reigned for decades atop Temple Israel in Sharon, Massachusetts, but he resigned in recent months after revealing he'd had an extramarital affair with a 16-year-old boy. 16 is the age of consent in Massachusetts. However, a related extortion scheme and possible financial fraud to pay off the extortionist could land the rabbi and others in jail. Moving on to a positive story about youth, Israeli and Palestinian teenagers joined for a soccer team, and Christian Needon has that story.
Soccer is the most popular sport in the world, and as the world watches adults take to the pitch in Brazil for the 2014 World Cup, teenage counterparts are also in Brazil to play in the Football for Hope Festival. Organized by FIFA and Street Football World, it's an event aimed at encouraging participants to effect positive social change in their communities. At the first Football for Hope Festival, at 2010's World Cup in South Africa, filmmaker Shilpi Gupta followed 3 teams from 3 continents, including one composed of Israelis and Palestinians, for her new documentary, Changing the Game. Gupta talked to TJC about filming 3 members of the joint squad in Israel and the West Bank in the lead-up to the festival, and the importance the event held for her subjects.
32 teams, 36 countries, no referees, And it's trying to emphasize the spirit of fair play. And so that's really what's guiding these games, more so than what team wins. The idea is to foster diplomacy over just being the next Messi or Ronaldo.
The Twinned Peace Sports School program, featured in Gupta's documentary, is a collaboration between the Perez Center for Peace in Jaffa and Palestinian organization Al-Quds.
They bring the Palestinians to the Israeli communities, and they play together on these joint teams. So it's not Israelis against Palestinians, it's Israelis and Palestinians against other Israelis and Palestinians, so that they form like a bond as teammates.
But getting Palestinian kids to an Israeli soccer pitch can be a challenge.
They're across the separation wall. They have to go through a checkpoint to get to meet each other. And yet here they are playing together despite, a lot of their community members are like, why are you playing with them? Why are you playing with the other side? They just want to kill you, whatever. But here they are coming together and kind of flying in the face of everything we hear about Israel and Palestine and this impenetrable conflict.
Gupta's Israeli subject lives in the direct path of that conflict.
He lives right about 12 kilometers from Gaza. So he to me has a really interesting story. And it's funny because you ask them all about, what are your experiences with the conflict? And they all are just kind of like, no, we're just here to play soccer. There's no politics, And then as he's giving us a tour of his house, he's like, yeah, this is the safety room. This is where we come when the bombs go off or when the alarms go off. And it wasn't to him a symbol of how he deals with the conflict.
To see more from Shilpi Gupta's new documentary film, Changing the Game, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. June is Russian American Heritage Month, and Jewish emigres were out in large numbers at a recent celebration, as Meredith Gansman reports.
What do Google founder Sergey Brin, novelist Gary Scheintgart, WhatsApp founder Jan Koum, and singer-songwriter Regina Spektor have in common? They're all of Russian descent. For the 12th annual Russian Heritage Month, the Russian American Foundation honored 5 unique Russian-speaking Americans for building understanding between the Russian and American traditions. The ambassador to Kazakhstan, a principal dancer in the American Ballet Theater, a sculptor, representatives from the Russian American Officers Association, and the president of the World Forum of Russian-Speaking Jewry, Alexander Levin.
People have a very good culture, very long history, and if they bring this history and culture to the United States, it's very good.
Noteworthy New Yorkers of non-Russian descent also paid their respects to the celebration of the Russian-American connection. Special guest New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio stressed the strength and history of Russian culture in New York City, and he did so in 2 different languages. In his first public appearance with the Russian community, Mayor Bill de Blasio followed the very Italian custom when in Rome, but tweaked it a bit for a Russian-speaking crowd.
Добрый вечер.
That means good evening in Russian.
This community, which I've gotten to know very well over the years, this community means so much to New York City.
35 years since the beginning of the third wave of immigration from the former Soviet Union to the United States, Mayor de Blasio congratulated the community on its continuing prominence.
It's strong, it's vibrant, it is more and more one of the communities identified with New York City.
It's a community that's also strongly linked with local Jewish culture, Levin said.
New York is the capital of the whole world of the Jewish people, so it's very good when this Russian brings our heritage here.
But Levin would like to see Russian Americans better represented in the government.
In the state of Israel, we have Russian ministers, we have Russian vice prime ministers, we have Russians, a lot of people in the Knesset. Fortunately, we don't have something like this in the United States, but I believe we can create this very soon.
To see more from Russian Heritage Month, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, 2 debut novels track the Jewish immigrant experience. Boris Fishman's debut novel was lauded on the cover of the New York Times Book Review. It explores what things are like for late 20th century Soviet émigrés and has a fascinating twist around the fabrication of Holocaust reparations claims. Fishman's novel is A Replacement Life. And Susan Jane Gilman is known as the author of 3 popular works of nonfiction, but in her debut novel, she tells a classic American story of a tough woman who won't let the experience of being a poor Jewish immigrant on the Lower East Side keep her from what she wants. Her novel is The Ice Cream Queen of Orchard Street. Here are some highlights from my interview with Boris Fishman. So it's a beautiful novel that's very well written, and it's got great characters, but unquestionably the headline out of it will be the piece that people will know about it before they've read the book is that it's about fraud in Holocaust reparations claims. We've seen a lot of news about that in recent years. How did you come upon the idea of making that your claim for this book?
I started writing it before that news broke. I started writing in the fall of '09, and that was exposed in 2010, though it had been going on since the 90s. But for me, the story had its origin 15 years before, in the mid-90s. My grandmother, unfortunately, I have to say was, not is, she passed away, was a survivor. When we got out of the Soviet Union, she became eligible to apply for restitution because people behind the Iron Curtain were not. At that point, we'd been in America for 6-8 years. I had the best English in the family because I was the youngest by far. I was 15 or 16, and the paperwork was given to me. And it was quite exciting even at that early age because it kind of came down to how good a story you could tell. They didn't really ask. They asked for documentation if you had it, but that wasn't a true barrier if you didn't. So this matter of the historical record became a matter of storytelling. And for a young writer or an aspiring writer, that's pure catnip.
The book follows through its main character, this family that came over from the Soviet Union with 3 generations from grandparents and then a young child and his parents. And the same way that you came over. When that happens, there's this generational problem.
When you immigrate to a country as comprehensively foreign from the Soviet Union as America is, I mean, your viewers have to imagine immigrating to North Korea right now. Do you know what I mean? Immigrating to America is an interesting experience because unlike 100 years ago, when you were really expected to assimilate, that is not the case now. I know so many people who took up residence in South Brooklyn and really have remained in a kind of Soviet Union of the soul, and their children are far closer to those traditions than you'd imagine. And by traditions, I mean how they relate to their parents. However, even as you go like this, you want to honor and respect your elders. But how do you honor your elders if their definition of honor is different? And sort of building that bridge is something that I really wanted to explore in the novel.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.